Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back to today's Daf, which is YOMA Daf Zayin. We are in the midst of a discussion regarding a carbon which needs to be brought betum, a carbon tzibur, which is tummy. Rashi brings a Gemara in Pesachim which tells us, Ish ki etmei lenefesh, only if it's an individual. He cannot bring a carbon betumah, he has to wait for Pesach Sheni, and so forth. But a tzibur can bring the carbon betumah. Now, two ways to look at this. Should we say that the Torah was mater, the tumah, and regarded this carbon as though it was brought pitahara, it's the highest level of carbon. There's nothing wrong with it. That's Rav Nachman's opinion. Tumah hutra hi betzibur. And as Rashi in Pesachim tells us, the Torah treats this carbon as though it's a carbon tar. There's nothing wrong with it. Transforms it, so to speak, from a carbon tameh to a carbon tar. It's mutar. Whereas Rav Shesha says, Tumah dechuya hi betzibur. The tumah does pose a concern. It's a real concern. There's nothing wrong with this carbon. Don't treat it like a carbon tar. It is a carbon tummy. But out of necessity, Rashi says, Bekoishi hutra. Out of necessity. Torah says, okay, we'll overlook the fact that it's tummy. And that's a privilege given to the tzibur. So as we mentioned yesterday, suppose the kehanim were tummy, they will bring the carbon tzibur even betumah. According to Rav Nachman, it's a complete heter. You don't even have to go look for kahanim tahirim, because there's no difference. Tumah, tahar, it's the same thing. If we have kahanim here that are available to bring the carbon and they are tamei, they can bring it betumah. And we treat this carbon as though it's a carbon tahar. Whereas Rav Shesha says, only out of necessity. There's no access to kohanim that are tahirim. Then okay, b'diavad will bring a carbon betumah. The Torah allowed that to happen if it's a carbon tzibur. But don't think this has the same level as a carbon tahara. It's a carbon that's tamei. And therefore, if you have a viable option, of course, you want to pursue it. Says the Gemara on the second line from the top. Omar Rav Sheshes, how do I know that my approach is correct? Tumah is the chuya b'tzibur. It's pushed away. It's overlooked. But it's still present. It still presents a serious concern, and we're meant to avoid it, if possible. This Tanya we learned in the Brayso, Yo'imedu makriv minchas o'imah. The Kohen was standing and bringing the mincha of the Yomer on the 15th day of Nisan. V'nitmes biyado, it so happened that the mincha contracted some type of tumah while in his hands. Omer, the Kohen announces the facts. Umevin acheres tachteh, and they bring another one in its stead. So we went to try to find an alternative, a mincha which is kosher. Don't use the tummy one. If you have another option, v'im ein sham elahi. If the only one available is this one, we can't find other mincha material to take its place. We tell the kohen, have a pikech, be smart, ushtoik, and keep quiet. Don't advertise the fact that this mincha is tummy. Rashi in Nachas says, it's in order to avoid creating an impression. The observer will say, well, look, they're bringing a carbon betumah, and any carbon can be brought betumah, which is not true, because there's only a privilege granted to the tzibur, for the carbon tzibur. So in order to avoid creating false impressions, we tell them, just keep quiet, if possible, and of course you'll bring this mincha. It's a carbon tzibur, which can be brought betumah. Getani miyas. At any rate, what does the Brayso say? Omer, this kohen will announce the fact that the mincha just became tamei. Umevin acheres tachteh, and they bring another one in its place. Apparently, you meant to pursue another option. If you have access to a mincha tahira, you meant to prefer that one over this one. And this is the right of Sheshes. Tumah is not a straight out heter b'tzibur. It's not a blank check. Out of necessity, we allow it. But if there's a viable option, if you can access a mincha which is Torah, of course you meant to do so. And there's a kasha on Rav Nachman who says, Tumah hutra b'tzibur poses no concern whatsoever. You don't even have to go find another mincha. This mincha has been designated as the mincha so'omer. Just go for it. Tumah hutra b'tzibur. So what's Rav Nachman do with this brisa, which seems to indicate otherwise? You're meant to try to get a substitute on Rav Nachman and Moedina. I agree. In this case, this is different. Heicha the ikesh shiraim lachila. You see, a mincha has a koimetz which goes on the mizbeach, but the shiraim are meant to be eaten by the kohanim. And although a minchas tzibur can be brought betuma, but keep in mind that's only to allow the hakrava. It's kosher. They're yetzer rechiv, but they still will not be able to eat the shiraim, as Rashi will bring for us. Because even a carbon tzibur which is brought betuma, the hakrava is kosher, but the shiraim cannot be eaten under those circumstances. Now, a minchas shiraim is meant to be eaten. It's part of the process. It's part of the kapara actually, when the kohanim eat the shiraim. So, preferably, we arrange it in a way that the shiraim will be edible, and therefore the Brisa says, if you can find an alternate mincha, a mincha which is tar, which will, number one, give you the kashrus for the hakrava. Number two, will enable the shiraim to be eaten. Of course, that's the way to go. I was speaking about, says Rav Nachman, an oila, for instance, which is completely on the mizbech. There's no shiraim there. In that case, I maintain tumahotra b'tibur. Even if you find another backup carbon, proceed with this carbon. It's completely tar. It's completely mut. Says Rashi, 4 lines from the top of the Yom. Rav Nachman responded, "Medina heicha the ika shiraim lachila. The afagav the carbon tzibur kar betuma. Although carbon tzibur is brought betuma, ein necha betuma. In that case, it won't be eaten because I mean meketet tzoylin, as the Mishnah over there tells us. Ubemincha nekmetzes. But in a case where the shiraim being generated, such as a mincha, medina the mahadrina lasses b'tahara sheyu shiraim nechal. Of course, I also would advise you to go find a mincha which is tar in order to enable this shiraim to be eaten. Continues Gemara with another kasha on Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman was the one who said, "Tumahutra b'tzibur, don't look for an alternative. Just proceed with the akrava. Meisive haya makriv minchas parim ve'il mukvas." This kohen was standing and bringing the mincha of a par, an ayil or keves. We're assuming this is referring to the minchas nesachem brought along with every carbon, and the mincha is completely burnt on the mizbeach, completely offered on the mizbeach without any shirayim. What happened? V'nitmes biyadei. And somehow it got tamei. Omer, he makes that announcement, and they try to bring him another one. They bring another one in its place. If this is the only mincha available now, we tell him, keep quiet, and of course proceed to use this mincha. Once again, we see that if we have an easy alternative, we have a way to replace this mincha which became tamei. We went to do so. And there's a kasha of Sheshes who says there's no need to do that. My love, should we not assume that the discussion here is regarding parim, elim, ukvasim, the chag? For instance, the parim, elim, ukvasim that are brought as karbanis on sukkahs, where they require a minchas nesachim to accompany them, and those minchas nesachim are going to be completely brought in the mizbeach without any shirayim element present there. So it's completely on the mizbeach. There's no shirayim concern, and still, what does the Brisa say? If you have a way out, don't bring them. What do you mean? According to Rav Nachman, too much of a tzibur. Rav Nachman will respond as follows. You're mistaken. We're not speaking about those types of menachos which are accompanying the karbonis tzibur, which are hutzah b'tzibur. And again, karbonis tzibur means something which is time related, as a set time. We're not speaking about those types of menachos which are connected to karbonis tzibur and have no shirayim attached to them, are going to be brought completely in the mizbech, in which case, of course, too much b'tzibur, don't look for a substitute. No, that's not the case here. Why? Parim, and the Brisa speaks about parim, paravadazara. We're discussing a very unique carbon. If you stroll over there with the zara to bring a par. Now here, it's not a time-related carbon. It doesn't have a set time. Avagav the tzibur, even though it's being purchased by the tzibur and being machab on the tzibur, kibbutz loy kavil is man. But since it doesn't have a set time, we hope it's not something which is a recurring event. It's a par for a chet of a desire. It's something unique and it's a one-time event. In which case, it has no right to be deiches Shabbos or Tumah, which are unique privileges granted to korbanos which are time sensitive, which are set in Zman. In this case, however, it's a mincha coming along with a parva zara, which is not considered something that is doichet tuma lechatchila. Mahadrina, that's why we look for an alternative. I'm not speaking about this type of case, says Rav Nachman. I'm speaking about an ordinary carbon tzibur. Over there we say, too much of a tzibur, don't look for an alternative. So that's parim. We had a list of parim, elim, kvasim. So parim, referring to the parva zara. Elam, says the Gemara, be'ela shel Aaron. Once again, I'm not speaking about your typical carbon tzibur. Speaking about the ram of Aaron HaKohen, the Kohen Gadol's personal carbon. We learned this the other day. He pays for it on his own. His personal carbon, his personal kapara. The avagav, the kavil, is man. Now, although it has a set time, it's Yom Kippur related, so technically it should have the same privileges as a carbon tzibur. It should override tumah, etc. However, says the Gemara, there's one catch. Kivan the yachitu, since it's a privately owned carbon, Madridan, we seek to find an alternative. Taisus explains, it doesn't appear like a typical carbon tzibur. So to avoid creating confusion and false impressions that a carbon yachid overrides tumah, we try to find an alternative. That's what the Brisa meant. The mincha along with the aisle of Aaron HaKohen, a got tameh, don't bring it. Find an alternative. And finally, the Brisa said, Kvasim, we're speaking about a mincha that has shirayim. Bekeves habonam ima omer. They get shirayim lachila. We're not speaking about ordinary kvasim which have those minchas nesachim accompanying them. Rather, we're speaking about a very specific mincha, minchas ha'omer, which comes with the keves. Minchas ha'omer has shirayim lachila. And as we mentioned earlier, Rav Nachman agrees. When there's shirayim in the picture, try to bring it betahara to enable those leftovers to be eaten by the kehanim. Therefore, says the Gemara, it's unrelated to the subject matter of our discussion between Rav Nachman and Sheshes, whether tumah hutra b'tzibur or tchuy b'tzibur. Here we're not speaking about your typical carbon tzibur. Either we're speaking about something that has shirayim, either we're speaking about something which isn't even a carbon tzibur, meaning it's a parva zara which doesn't have a set time. Either we're speaking about a carbon tzibur has a set time, but it's brought by a yachid, elo shel Aaron, in which case it doesn't appear like a carbon tzibur. With Rabbanan, we don't treat it as such. However, if you would really have a full-fledged carbon tzibur, a proper carbon tzibur, which has a set time, and doesn't have shirayim, doesn't have any of these concerns, of course, as Rav Nachman, tum hutra b'tzibur. Hashem regards this carbon tzibur as though it would be tor. It's a carbon on the highest level. Continues the Gemara Meisi, we have another kasha on Rav Nachman, who said tum hutra b'tzibur. Dam shenitma v'zarka. Suppose the dam of the carbon became tamei, and they did zrika. B'shoigig hurtza. If they did it b'shoigig, by accident, it works. The carbon is kosher. B'mezid, but if it was done purposely, loy hurtza, the carbon is not accepted. And Rashi will explain for us that, of course, this is only the Rabbanon. It's a knas. In any case, what do we see? We see from here that a carbon which is tamei, it's not so simple to be makar of it. In fact, if it's b'mezid, if you went ahead and it was makar of it b'mezid, it doesn't even work to a certain extent. Apparently, it's a carbon tamei. It's not like it's a carbon tar. We don't say tumah and we ignore the fact that it's tamei. No, it just turned into tahar. No, it's completely tamei, and therefore b'mezid it doesn't work. It says who says that Bryce is speaking about a carbon tzibur? It's actually speaking about a privately owned carbon, a carbon yachid. In which case, of course, you don't say too much of it tzibur. Let's take a look at Rashi on the right here, 4 or 5 lines up from where we're holding the Gemara. B'mezid lo yurtza. Says Rashi, why doesn't it work if it was b'mezid? V'afal pisha tzitz maratz. Now Rashi introduces a new concept here called tzitz maratz. We're going to see it in the upcoming Gemara. We learn from a pasuk that the nameplate which said Kodesh Lashem, which would be worn on Aaron HaKohen's, for it had the ability to be machsher tumah, to rectify the psul tumah of a carbon. The tzitz is meratzah, it is machsher, it undoes, so to speak, the psul tumah. If there's a tumah that occurs with the actual chayfetz of the carbon, whether the dam, the chayl of the basar, if those become tamei, the tzitz will address that concern and be machsher the carbon. We're going to see in the Gemara soon. So now we have a brayso which told us if the dam became tummy and he reserved the dam, he did a b'shagi hurtza. So Rashi explains that the tzitz is meratz. The tzitz undoes the effect of the tum, and it works. The carbon is kosher. But if it was b'mezid, it doesn't work. Asks Rashi, v'ava b'shat tzitz meratz, even though the tzitz really addresses even if it was b'mezid. In the Torah we don't find a chiluk between shagig and mezid regarding the powers of the tzitz. Says Rashi, konsura bonam, shlo yibasam nechal. Chacham applied a knas. Well, you did it b'mezid, don't eat the basa. We don't treat it like a properly processed carbon. But of course the carbon itself is kosher. Avabalam milum skapru. They were yaitid, they're carbon, they don't have to bring another one. Because in Torah it's good, if they bring another one, it's bringing a chulin to Azara. So like nice chulin Azara, domidai rice, a chazi. In Torah, even if it was, the dam tummy was nizak remezed, it still works. So he was yaitid his carbon. In any case, what pertains to us is, umiu shamine minei love heteri. In any case, we see from this price that it's not a straightforward heter. When something is tummy, you don't say, well, it's as if it's tar. In fact, we see if it was done with mezid, Chachamim said lo yurtza, you can't even eat the carbon. It's not such a simple matter to bring a carbon b'tumah. And this seems to be a kasha of Nachman who says, tumah b'tzibur. We treat it as though it's tar completely. And the answer is, we were speaking about a yachid here. Continues the Gemara. Tashma will have another kasha of Nachman who says, tumah b'tzibur. Alma tzitz meratz. What type of tumah occurrence will the tzitz be masakin, be machshir, and address? Al adam, bala basar, bala chelev shnitma. All different portions of the carbon that acquire tumah, irrelevant of the circumstance. Ben b'shoigig, ben b'mezid, ben b'oines, ben rotzen. It's interesting that mezid and rotzen really are synonymous. They're both speaking about something done purposely. Rashi will tell us that mezid is in contrast with shogig, so they go in pairs. In contrast to shogig, to by accident, we say mezid on purpose. In contrast to ba'oines, unwillingly, we say b'rotzain, willingly. But really, mezid and rotzen are pretty much one and the same. So, however this tumah occurs, under all circumstances, shogig, mezid, etc., bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur. Here we have clearly a reference to tzibur. And what does the Brisa say? If anything happens to the carbon, the tzitz will take care of it. And the carbon is kosher. That's the Brisa. What does this prove to us? That even when the carbon tzibur is tummy, it poses a real concern here. And we need the tzitz to address that tumah. Now, according to Rav Nachman, tumah husha b'tzibur. We ignore the fact that it became tummy. We look at it as though it's tar. Why would he need any help from the tzitz? The fact that the tzitz has to come offer assistance, so to speak, indicates that the carbon is somewhat deficient. And the tzitz has to come to the rescue, to be meratza that carbon. That works well if you say, like Rav Sheshes, tumah t'chuya b'tzibur. Carbon is a low-level carbon, it has tumah. It can't really accomplish what it's meant to accomplish. And therefore the tzitz has to come along and help him out. And affect that kapara. Rectify that deficiency. But according to Rav Nachman, tumah hutsha b'tzibur. This carbon is treated as though it's tar. He doesn't need any tzitz to come help him out. Risa gadaydach tumah heteri b'tzibur. Lamali l'ritzui. What do you need tzitz? Be around. Amalach Rav Nachman responds like this. You're right. A carbon tzibur does not need any assistance from the tzitz or anything else. Tumah hutsha b'tzibur. Kiktoni atzitz meratza di yachid. When the Brisa says that tzitz is meratza, it's in reference to the carbon yachid. Although in the Brisa we find both terms, bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur, as Rashi will tell us. The tzitz is referring to the yachid. The words bein b'tzibur are simply saying that a carbon tzibur, which somehow became tummy, is fine, is kosher b'tzibur. Not on account of the tzitz. It's kosher because tumah hutsha b'tzibur. That's one teretz. Tzitz is needed only for the yachid. V'bo yisema, another teretz, afilu tema b'tzibur, even if we're speaking about a carbon tzibur, bahana to like kivil uzman, we're speaking about a publicly brought carbon, but not a time-related carbon. Since it doesn't have a set time, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't have that privilege of Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. In which case, Tumah does pose a concern, and it's only on account of that tzitz that the carbon will be kasher. So we answer the kasher of Nachman, who says Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, from the Brisa, which seemed to indicate that the tzitz is needed to come help things out. Apparently it's not such a simple matter. And the Teretz is, the Brisa, which mentions tzitz, is in reference to carbon yachid. Whether it's brought by a yachid or whether it's a carbon tzibur that has no time, no set zman, in which case the concept of Tumah Hutra B'tzibur won't apply. Because the concept of Tumah being Hutra B'tzibur, the Gemara in Pesachim learns from the Pasuk, B'moy adai, carbonos that have a moed, a set time, have the ability to be doicha Shabbos, to be doicha Tumah, but something which doesn't have a set time doesn't have that ability. Let's go over to Rashi again. So if we go back up from our current spot in the Gemara, around 6 lines up, it says Rashi, Al ma tzitz meratz. The Brisa begins with a question. What is the tzitz meant to do? Aaron will carry, so to speak. It will be mechaper on the deficiency, the oven, the avera, something wrong that happened with the karbonis. Shiratzilu baleim, to validate the carbon, to make it kosher, that it's applied to its owner, and he had a kapar. And the Brisa says, you know what? It works for tumah, that occurs with the dam, basar, chelev, bein b'shogig, bein b'mezid, bein b'onis, bein ratzin. Says Rashi, ratzin havri b'chal mezid. Ratzin and mezid go together. Elagabi onis, shalach misni ratzin. In contrast to onis, we say ratzin. Bein b'tzibur. Here's the punchline. With the boy letzis ritzui, the fact that we need tzis to address tumah by tzibur, shema min olav hetru. This is a clear raya that even a tumah by tzibur is not to be ignored. It's not heter. It needs tzitz, and this is a kasha of Nachman. Now Rashi goes over to a side explanation, because really now we have a kasha. The Brisa we see that its tzitz can take care of tumah regardless of whether it's a carbon yachid or carbon tzibur. If so, why is it that we always speak about a carbon tzibur, which is doichet tumah? Here we seem to say that even a carbon yachid is okay with tumah because the tzitz will take care of it. So that's actually the big difference. This Brisa is discussing the carbon itself, which became tumah, the dam, the basa, the chelev. Yeah, over there we have the concept of tzitz addressing that tumah, regardless of whether it's a carbon yachid or carbon tzibur. But if a person, let's say a kohen, who's marked the carbon as tumah, then we don't have any heter by a carbon yachid. There's no allowance for a carbon yachid to be brought with a tumah that applies to a person, like the kohen, the Beis Hamikdash, or in the case of a carbon pesach, the owner is tumah. Tumah is gavri. Tumah pertaining to the individual, the person, a personal tumah, is not rectified by the tzitz. The only time we find that a carbon can be brought when a person is tummy, when the kohen, etc. is tummy, that is unique, that is exclusive to carbon tzibur. I have a question whether hutra or t'chuya, fine, but the concept only applies to carbon tzibur. Says Rashi, Uma bin yochad tzibur. What then is the difference between yochad and tzibur? Both have the tzitz to take care of the tumah. Says Rashi, there's a big fundamental difference. Sha yochad ein tumas haguf nitche etzli. Shein tzitz meratz al tumas haguf. Tumas haguf, meaning the person, the kohen, etc., who's tummy, he cannot proceed with carbon yachid. Tzitz can't take care of that. The tzitz only takes care of a soul within the carbon proper, within the chayfas of the carbon, but not pertaining to a person. However, b'shel tzibur, nitchis tumas haguf etzlam. Of course, by tzibur we have a privilege that even a tumas haguf is negated, but unrelated to tzitz. Tzitz, not because of the tzitz. We learned that from the pasuk that Rashi brought. By Pesach, we see that a yachid is pushed away to Pesach Sheni, but not a tzibur. They have the privilege of bringing a carbon mitumah. Nothing to do with the tzitz. Tzitz doesn't relate to people. It relates to the psul within the carbon. So when it comes to a psul tumah within the carbon, you're right. Whether a yachid or a tzibur will have that tzitz take care of it. But what's unique about a carbon tzibur is pertaining to the individual tumah, the personal tumah. If a kohen is tumah, it can only be makar of a carbon tzibur, not a carbon yachid. Okay, so that's a side point. In any case, we see from this brisa, what does this negate to our sugi? Again, Rav Nachman tells us, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, whenever you have a Tumah B'tzibur, just ignore it. The Torah is Machshir the Tumah, made it Tahar. And we assume it's referring to all types of Tumah, whether the Kohen is Tummy, whether the Korban is Tummy. So we have a kasha from this brisa. We heard from this brisa. With the boy Tumas Basar v'Oilam B'tzibur Tzitz, since the tzitz has to come be Maratza, and a Tumas Basar, or Tumas Oilam, referring to the Dam, etc. Even if it's a Korban Tzibur, tzitz has to take care of it. What does that sound like? What does that indicate to us? That there's a problem to be addressed. It's not just blank check, Tumah Hutra B'tzibur, Shema Mina Tumas Haguf Shenitzchas Etzlam, all types of Tumas pertaining to even Korban Tzibur. Whether the Tumah of the Basar, whether Tumas Haguf, the Kohen becomes Tummy, any type of Tumah is not to be ignored because it's overridden with difficulty, out of necessity. It presents a concern, but we override it. And therefore, if you have an easy alternative, if you have a way to access a Kohen who's tired, or a Korban which is Tummy, Kol Kama de Matzina La Duri La Tahara Madrina, in as much as you can find Tahara, you meant to do so. Says the Kasha of Nachman, who says Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. Here we see that tzitz is needed to come help things. Even by tzibur. Apparently, even tzibur is adversely affected by Tumah. The Tumah is nidches out of necessity. That's a Kasha of Nachman. Says the Gemara, no, you're wrong. Kiktani, atzitz maratza de yachid tani. When the Brisa made reference to tzitz, be masakan, the Tumah and the Korban, only by Yachid. With Tzibur, although the Brisa mentions Tzibur alach sherek tani. Tzibur's Korban is kosher, that's all. But not that it needs a tzitz. Shav shal Tzibur kosher, v'loy de tzitz. It's completely mutter, like Rav Nachman said, without any help from the tzitz. That's one teretz. Hibo yisema Tzibur na mikoyz, referring to a Korban Tzibur. However, Korbanos that don't have a set time. Barach Korbanos, the leikavel uzman, in which case, shenitches tumah etzlan. The Tzitz Lane, we're speaking about those Korbanos that don't have a set time, in which case they don't have this privilege. We don't say Tumah Hutra B'tzibur those Korbanos. Tumah is a very real concern by those Korbanos, except that the Tzitz will come take care of it. So let's stop for a few seconds and just summarize what's going on. We have Tumah by Korbanos, but really two categories. Tumah of a person, suppose the Kohen became Tummy. We have Tumah in the Korban itself, the Dam, the Basar, and the Chelav. Regarding the Tumah of a person, which Rashi calls Tumas Haguf, elsewhere we call it Tumas Gavri, a personal Tumah is a very real concern by Korbanos Yachid. We can't address it, we can't rectify that. We can't proceed bringing a Korban Yachid when somebody's Tummy. But when it comes to Korban Tzibur, we allow it. But then we have Machlokes. Do we override the Tumah, which is really here? Or do we say it's Hutra B'tzibur and it's as though it's Tar? That's the Machlokes of Nachman of Sheshes. When it comes to the Tumah in the Korban itself, then actually Korban Yachid and Korban Tzibur both will benefit. Both will be okay, they'll benefit from tzitz. To be machshir. Meaning, a Korban Yachid, the tzitz will address the Tumah and the Korban will be kosher. The Korban Tzibur, well, it depends. According to Rav Nachman, we don't have to have it tzitz because Tumah Hutra B'tzibur. It says, oh, it's tar. According to Rav Sheshes, where the Tumah is real, is present, it's only overridden and set aside out of necessity, but it's really a Korban being brought with Tumah. In that case, it needs the tzitz to take care of it, to address the Tumah, to sort of undo that Tumah and be machshir the Korban. It's interesting to note that the Farshim pointed this out based on the Taisus and Zvachim that the Ritzit Tzitz only applies to the Korban which is tummy. But when a person's tummy, he doesn't need Ritzit Tzitz. It's an interesting point because the Korban is the actual Korban itself. That seems to be a more severe occurrence of Tumah. It carries more weight. It's the Korban which is tummy. In that case, we need more to help things out, to help matters, to rectify things. That's why we need the Ritzit Tzitz for that. That's why it's unique. It's a unique halacha directed at the tumah within the Korban, but if the person's tummy, a Korban Tzibur, and he can proceed and bring the Korban Tzibur, it's not an account of the tzitz, because the tzitz, as Rashi says, is not related to a tumah on a person. Only if the Korban became tummy, that's a heavyweight tumah, the actual chefetz is tummy, then the tzitz has to come along and be machshir. At any rate, continues the Gemara Meisvei. We're going to have another kasha, and this time it's going to be a kasha on Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes was the one who said, Tumah dechuya hi b'tzibur. We treat it as a carbon, which is tummy. You haven't really achieved the highest madrega of carbon, but the Torah allows it out of necessity. We have a kasha Meisvei v'nosa Aaron es avono kachim. Pasuk says that through the tzitz resting on Aaron's forehead, he will address and be machshir the avain, the avera, a deficiency, a psul that occurred with the karbanis. Now, the Torah doesn't specify which psul we're addressing. We have to go down the list and try to figure it out. Which oven is going to carry? Im oven pigel, Rashi explains, it means that a kohen had a machshava that is going to eat this carbon chuslan kaima, outside of its prescribed location. That's what we call pigel here. If that's what went wrong with the carbon, the tzitz won't take care of it. Hari kvar nemalei rotza, the carbon is unaccepted. There's no way to be machshir. Okay, so that's off the list. Him oven noiser, perhaps we're speaking that he had a kavana to eat the carbon chutz zmanai, beyond its expiry date. Hari kvar nemalei chashav, the carbon is not reckoned with. It's not kosher. You cannot say that Aaron will take care of that. That leaves us with only one option. Apparently, he's going to address a tumah deficiency. Why should we say a tumah is any worse than the other? Why should we say a tumah carries less weight than the other psulim? Answer is because we find elsewhere that tumah has a kula. We make exception from the rule when it comes to tumah. Hutra mechlala. We make an exception. We matter it from the klal. Generally, it can't be makar b'tumah. We do make an exception. But tzibur, a carbon tzibur can be brought b'tumah, and it's mutter to be brought b'tumah. This is a right to Rav Nachman. Tumah hutra b'tzibur. So that's why we conclude that it's this psul that the tzitz will take care of. Because unlike pigel and noiser, which have no exceptions to their rule, they're ironclad psulim, tumah does. We find elsewhere there is some sort of a crack in the wall. There is some sort of allowance when it comes to tumah. Tumah b'tzibur. Therefore, we presume that it has some sort of a leniency, and therefore, even if the carbon was brought b'tumah, the tzitz will take care of it. And we're speaking, of course, that the carbon itself became tamei, whether it's a carbon yachad, carbon tzibur, in which case we need to reach tzitz. Tzitz will address that tumah, because we find that tumah isn't so severe like other things. We see that even a kohen who's tamei can bring a carbon tzibur b'tumah, tumah b'tzibur. Before we continue, let's see the Rashi here on the top line. Ha'einei noisei, ha loshen mi'atu. Ha means, apparently, the only choice left, me'ata iyata moitze shei noisei el avain carbon tumah. Only thing left on the list is avain carbon tumah. Umay shnoda shadidin le'lekula. Why is it that we attribute the kula to tumah more than anything else? Hoyu matzina b'kalach, we find another kula. Although tumah is a concern by yachad, but by tzibur we find an exception. We can bring a carbon b'tzibur b'tumah. Therefore, we apply this kula as well. That if a carbon yachid was brought b'tumah, in which case we need tzitz, right? The dam became tamei, the basa became tamei, the chel became tamei. The tzitz will take care of it. So Rashi points out the carbon yachid because now we're following the approach to tumah hutra b'tzibur. So whenever we have a tumah b'tzibur, there's no need for any rectification. We don't need any tzitz. But by carbon yachid we do. Which psul will the tzitz address? Tumah. Because we find elsewhere that tumah has a kula. Now Tais is asking an obvious kasha. Of course it's tumah. It's the only thing left on the list. Why does the one have to give a tam? We find an exception by tumah. We already ruled everything else out. We ruled out pigel. We ruled out noiser. So what's left on the list? The Taisa says that you're right, we don't really have another option, but still, it has to conform with the wording of the pasuk. The pasuk which says that Aaron HaKohen is Nasas Avei Nakochim L'Ratzin Lahem, which seems to indicate that it's going to take care of an oven, an avera deficiency, which is acceptable elsewhere. It's an oven which is L'Ratzin Lahem Ba'alma. Elsewhere it works. It is acceptable. Taisa says it's based on the Gemara elsewhere. In Menachos, that's how we apply the drasha. So the only reason why we include Tumah is because we do find an allowance for Tumah elsewhere by a carbon tzibur. Continues Rashi. Anyway, what do we see from here? The Brisa said, use words shehutra mechlala b'tzibur. Alma hetehi b'tzibur. The wording of the Brisa tells us that it's a heter b'tzibur. It doesn't say shetchuya b'tzibur, shehutra b'chlala b'tzibur. There's a writer of Nachman that Tumah is hutra b'tzibur. Continues the Gemara in the second line, v'kashan of Sheshes. If so, we have a kashan of Sheshes, who said Tumah d'chuya b'tzibur, not hutra b'tzibur. Answers the Gemara Tanoi. Actually, it's machlokes Tanoi. As we're going to see soon, it's machlokes between Yehuda and Shimon, whether Tumah hutra b'tzibur or Tumah d'chuya b'tzibur. And apparently, this brisa, which maintains Tumah hutra b'tzibur, is following one of those shittas, and Rav Sheshes was following the other. And before we proceed, perhaps let's stop for a moment and just summarize the sugya up until this point. We discussed Tumah occurring with karbanos. We have two categories: Tumah of the person, Tumah of the kohen, or Tumah of the carbon itself. In Tumah of the kohen, we have carbon tzibur and carbon yachid. By carbon tzibur, we have machlekes. According to Rav Nachman and Rabbi Yehuda coming up in the sugya, Tumah is hutra b'tzibur. Don't worry about it. The Torah regards this carbon as though it was brought by Tahara. Rav Sheshes, and likewise Rav Shimon coming up in the Gemara soon, hold Tumah d'chuya b'tzibur. We override, we look away from the Tumah, out of necessity. But certainly, if you have another option, if you can find the Kohen was tar, you're meant to do so. Regarding a carbon yachid, all agree, you cannot bring a carbon yachid if there's a tumah on the person. Now what about the tumah on the carbon? So if it's a carbon tzibur, again according to Rav Nachman, it's hutra b'tzibur. Don't worry about it. According to Sheshes, tumah t'chuya b'tzibur, and therefore you need the tzitz to take care of it and make it kosher. By carbon yachid, all agree the tumah there is just like a t'chuya. It's a real concern. It's there. The only reason why the carbon is kosher is because the tzitz was meratza the psoltum. The Gemara concluded this question of whether Tumah hutra or d'chuya is actually machlokes Tanoi. Continues more the Sanya as we find in the Brisa. We spoke about the tzitz being machshir the psol Tumah. The question is, does the tzitz have to be worn in order to be activated, or the very fact that there is a tzitz, it has inherent power to be machshir the Tumah of the carbon? The Sanya tzitz bein sheyesh al mitzchay, whether it's present on the forehead of Aaron HaKohen, bein she'ein al mitzchay, whether it's not on his forehead, sitting on the table meratza, it addresses the tumah of the carbon. Because it sits, not only is it a article of clothing worn by the Kohen, it's like a klei sharis. It's like the Ura and the Shulchan, the Menorah. It has inherent power, even if it's not being worn at the time. Did Rabbi Shimon? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, no, oideyu al mitzchay meratza. If it's sitting on his forehead, it's being worn, then it works. It works as a team. The Kohen Gadol, in tandem with the tzitz, will address the tumah. But if it's not being worn, it doesn't have that power. It's not being used as bigdei kahuna. It cannot be meratza. Ein idea al mitzchay. If it's not on his forehead, ein meratza. It doesn't work. So according to Rabbi Shimon, the tzitz has inherent power. According to Rabbi Yehuda, only when it's worn. Rabbi Shimon says, "I'll prove to you." He turns to Rabbi Yehuda and he says, "I'll prove that it doesn't need to be worn to be activated." I'll prove from Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. We know that many times throughout Yom Kippur, he would remove several of his bigdei kahuna, the bigdei zav. For instance, when he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, he would only wear the 4 bigdei lavan. Now at that point, he wasn't wearing the tzitz, and still we assume, unless we find otherwise, we assume that every tumah occurrence on Yom Kippur is addressed by the tzitz. Apparently, even if he's not wearing it, the tzitz is meratzah. Although it's not all the time, it's not sitting on his forehead, it still is meratzah. Apparently, the tzitz has its own power. Rabbi Yehuda, being a Raif Yom Kippur, keep in mind, Yom Kippur is a carbon tzibur, which does not need tzitz to address its tumah concerns. Why? Tumah hutra b'tzibur. Hanach the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, let alone the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, leave that alone, don't bring that into the mix. Shetumah hutra b'tzibur. It's a carbon tzibur. It's a set time. It's a kabor leizman. It's doichet tumah. It's hutra b'tzibur. And no tzitz is required to offer any assistance here. However, when tzitz is required, like by carbon yachid, of course, it only works if the kohen is wearing it at the time. So it's pretty clear that Rabbi Yehuda holds tumah hutra b'tzibur. What does Rabbi Shimon hold? Rabbi Shimon, who brought a raya from the fact that tzitz works on Yom Kippur, even though it's not on his forehead, that's a raya that tzitz has inherent powers. What does tzitz work on Yom Kippur? It's a carbon tzibur. Apparently, Rabbi Shimon holds mechlal Rabbi Shimon savar tumah d'chuya b'tzibur. That even by a carbon tzibur, the tumah is the chuya. It's overridden. It's overlooked. It's set aside out of necessity. But it's a real concern. It presents itself as a real concern, and the carbon is not considered a carbon tar at all. And therefore it only works with its tzitz itself, coming to help it out. The fact that it works on Yom Kippur, even during those moments when the kohen isn't wearing the tzitz, that's a raya. You don't have to be wearing the tzitz for it to have its power. Let's take a look at Rashi, 6 lines from the top. Rabbi Shimon says, "Bein sheyeshna tzitz hamitzchay shel kohen gadol k'she'ir a tumah al carbon." Whether the tzitz is actually present on the kohen gadol when tumah occurs, or whether or not, it still works. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, he has to be wearing it. Says Rabbi Shimon to Rabbi Yehuda, what about the kohen gadol Yom Kippur? Einay al mitzchay b'shas avodas hayom ha'pnimis. He's not wearing the tzitz when he's doing the avodas hayom inside. She'ein nichnas lefnim b'vigdei zav. He doesn't wear b'vigdei zav inside. So what's going to happen if tumah applies then? How's the tzitz going to take care of it? That's a right. That tzitz works even if it's not being worn. Says Rabbi Yehuda, no. Yom Kippur, she'tamot shalai, she'kulei carbon tzibur, be'en etzarach l'tzui tzitz. Carbon tzibur doesn't need any help from the tzitz. It's hutra b'tzibur. Mechlal Rabbi Shimon savar t'chuyei. It's not hutra, it's t'chuyei. He needs a tzitz. V'tzitzu d'meratzala. V'ayatanoi. So although this was a discussion regarding the power of the tzitz, according to Rabbi Shimon, even if it's not being worn, it works. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it has to be worn. But this discussion produced another secondary discussion, which is very much negated to us. It turns out that Rav Yehuda holds tumah hutra b'tzibur, like Rav Nachman, and Rav Shimon holds tumah d'chuya b'tzibur, like Rav Sheshes. So we had a kasha from a brisa on Rav Sheshes, the brisa which said tumah hutra. The answer is, yeah, that brisa is following Rav Yehuda. Rav Sheshes was in line with the other Tana Rav Shimon. Okay, let's continue with the concept of the tzitz. According to Rav Shimon, it's always going to be meratzah whether or not he's wearing it. According to Rabbi Yehuda, he has to be wearing it. The Gemara will describe this discussion in greater detail. Omar Abai, b'nish barat tzitz. Suppose the tzitz broke apart. The kul alma le pligid le meratzah. All agree it doesn't work. It's not even roy to be worn. It doesn't have the ability to be meratzah at all. Ki pligi, when then is there machlekes to totally b'chsichsa? Suppose it's intact, but it's hanging on a peg, meaning it's intact, but he's not wearing it. Rabbi Yehuda savar al metzach v'nasa. Let me just read the pasuk, which I actually have on the side. The Torah Shalom brings it. I'll read the entire pasuk, and that will allow us, that would afford us clarity in the upcoming Gemara. The pasuk says, "V'hoya al metzach Aaron." The tzitz will be present on the metzach of Aaron. V'nasa Aaron es avoina kachim, and allow Aaron to carry, so to speak, to rectify, to be machshir, the oven, which we now know is oven tumah, according to the kachim. Asher yakdishu bnei Yisrael l'chol matnos kachim. V'hoya. Okay, this is the key ending of the pasuk. V'hoya al mitzchoy tamid l'ratzon lehem fnei Hashem. So the pasuk begins V'hoya al metzach Aaron v'nasa Aaron savana kachim, which seems to say that it only works when it's sitting on his forehead. Likewise, the pasuk concludes, "V'haya al mitzchay tamid l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem." It should be there constantly. We're going to see how Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, respectively, will interpret this pasuk. Says the Gemara again, "Kipligi d'toli b'sichsa." The discussion is only when it's intact, but hanging on a peg, meaning it's there, it's intact, but he's not wearing it. Rabbi Yehuda Savar al metzach v'nasa. He focuses on the first part of the pasuk. The only time it's v'nasa, he carries the oven, he addresses the psul if it's on his metzach. Rabbi Shimon Savar, let's focus on the second part of the pasuk, on the ending of the pasuk. V'haya al mitzchay tamid l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem. It's a constant thing. What do you mean constant? My tamid. What does the pasuk mean constant? Ilay metamid al mitzchay. Literally, it's always on his forehead. He has to wear the tzitz all the time, 24/7. How can that be? Miloi boy me'al b'beis he doesn't have to enter the washroom, in which case he can't wear a tzitz. Umiloi boy meinam doesn't need to sleep. You can't wear a tzitz, just as we don't wear a tefillin when we sleep. Apparently, he doesn't have to wear a tamid. What then does the pasuk mean? El tamid miratzu. When the pasuk says tamid l'ratzon l'fnei Hashem, it means it always has the power to be miratzu, although he's not wearing it. So now we'll go back and forth. What does Rabbi Yehuda do with this pasuk? What does Shimon do with the Rabbi Yehuda's pasuk? Because we have one pasuk which starts Voya metzach aron v'nasa, which indicates that the power of the tzitz is only if it's sitting on his metzach. And at the end of the pasuk we have Voya al mitzchay tamid l'ratzon Hashem, which Rabbi Shimon interprets to mean it's always going to be in ratza whether or not it's sitting on his forehead. The Rabbi Yehuda nam yoksiv tamid. So what does Rabbi Yehuda do with the second part of the pasuk? Voya mitzchay tamid, which Rabbi Shimon interpreted it to mean that it always has the power of being miratz, even if it's not being worn. Says the Gemara, "Hu tamid shelo yasiach da'ato mimenu." The pasuk is simply telling you that when he's wearing it, he should not divert his attention from it. He has to remain focused and mindful of the fact that he has it sits on his head. K'de Rabba bar Rav Huna, as we find the Amar Rabba Rav Huna. A person must tap his tefillin every now and then to keep himself mindful of the fact that he's wearing tefillin. To pay attention to what you're wearing. We learn this from the tzitz. Since we find that the tzitz, despite the fact that it only has one remembrance of Hashem's name, Kodesh Hashem, only once. Still, what does the Torah say? You can't be Mesiach Das. You have to have kavanah. Al mitzchay tamid shelo yasiach da'ato mimenu. If that's why it sits, of course, tefillin, sheyesh b'en askaros arbi, in which there are many askaros, many mentionings of Hashem's name. Allah has come, certainly, you have to treat it with the proper respect, connect to it personally, focus on it, concentrate on it, be mindful of the fact that you're wearing tefillin. So that's Rabbi Yehuda's response. Tamid l'ratzon Hashem doesn't mean it has the power constantly, even when it's not being worn. It's enabled to be mashal the karbanis even when it's sitting on your table. Tamid l'ratzon means be mindful of the tzitz all the time when you're wearing it. Rabbi Shimon the Amar tamid l'ratzon says the Gemara now. According to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the word tamid indicates that it has the power to be miratza at all times, even when he's not wearing it. What does he do with the first part of the pasuk, which indicates otherwise? V'oksiv al metzach v'nasa. The nasa, he carries the oven. It addresses the psul only when it's on his forehead. How will look boiling makom with the asa? The pasuk is simply telling us where to put the tzitz, on his forehead. That's all. But really, even when it's sitting on the table, hanging on a hook, it can be miratz. Rabbi Yehuda look boiling makom minali. Now Rabbi Yehuda already used that first part of the pasuk for his halacha, that it's only noisy when it's on the metzach. So how does he know where to place the tzitz? It's not available for that. Nafkalimi al mitzchay. He splits it into two. V'hoya al metzach aron. That teaches you where to place the location of the tzitz. V'nasa, the next word tells you when it's on the metzach, it's v'nasa. So both things are learned from the same phrase. Reb Shimon nami typically al metzach. Al mitzchay, the Bach says al metzach. That's more correct. Take out the vav. Al metzach. According to Reb Shimon, the word al metzach, those two words already tell you location. So you can learn it from there. Why did the pasuk say al metzach aron v'nasa? And you're right. Al metzach on its own tells you location. According to both shittas, Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Ela al mitzchay v'nasa ma'yavle. What does he do with the word v'nasa? Which seems to indicate that it only works when it's on the metzach. What does Rabbi Shimon do with that? Malach, he tells you like this. Roy lemetzach meratza. She'ein roy lemetzach ein meratza. The tzitz has to be intact, has to be whole, has to be potentially wearable. Roy lemetzach. Then it has a din of a klishoris. Then it can be meratza even when it's not on his forehead. But she'ein roy lemetzach. But if it's not roy for his forehead, it's broken. Ein meratza, it won't work. Lafuki nishbar tzitz le meratza. Suppose if it's broken, it won't work. The Rabbi Yehuda nishbar tzitz benoli. And Rabbi Yehuda already used that first part of the pasuk, Voya metzach aron v'nasa, to tell you that the nesias oven only works when it's on his forehead. So that pasuk is unavailable to teach us the broken tzitz is ineffective. How does he know that halacha? Menolei nafklei mimetzach mitzchay. Because at the end of the pasuk, Voya mitzchay, we have an extra vav. Now we'll tell you the drasha that it has to be an absolute tzitz, it has to be intact, it has to be roy l'levish, otherwise it's ineffective. So what does Rabbi Shimon do with that extra vav? Rabbi Shimon metzach mitzchay lemashmalei. He doesn't use it for anything. We find this many times in Shas that one mandan will say, well, the vav, I don't dash in the vav. Okay, so in summation, we have a pasuk which describes the tzitz al metzach aron having the ability to be machshir avoin kachem, which we learn to be avoin tumah. We have two ways to interpret the pasuk: Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. And the bottom line is, Rabbi Yehuda will say, it tzitz only has its power when it's being worn by the kohen. Whereas Rabbi Shimon says, the tzitz on its own has inherent independent powers and can work even if it's not being worn. Let's go to the pasuk. Rabbi Yehuda says, V'hoya al metzach aron v'nasa, tells you, only when it's al mitzchay, it's v'nasa, it's meratz. But if it's off his forehead, it doesn't work. From the word that's avoin hakachim, all learn, it's referring to avoin tumah, that occurred with the carbon. V'hoya al mitzchay tamid, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's telling you, shalei siach da'at mimen. Mitzchay, the extra vav, tells you it has to be roy lemetzach as opposed to broken. According to Rabbi Shimon, the pasuk begins Voya metzach aron v'nasa. It's telling you it has to be roy lemetzach as opposed to broken. It's avoin hakachim. It's telling you avoin tumah. Voya mitzchay tamid is telling you that it's always going to be meratza, whether or not it's being worn. And mitzchay, the vav, he doesn't dash. And of course, according to all, we learn the location of the tzitz from the first wording in the pasuk V'hoya metzach aron to tell you where to place the tzitz. Okay, time for Riv Chazorah, today's daf. We began with a discussion regarding Tumah B'tzibur, of Machlekes between Rav Nachman and Rav Sheshes. Rav Nachman says Tumah Hucha B'tzibur. Rav Sheshes says Tumah T'chuyi B'tzibur. The Gemara tells us, what's the nafkamina? Should I go look for Kahanim U'Chat Tahirim? We actually had two versions yesterday. To what extent does Rav Nachman permit using Kahanim Tahirim when there is an alternative? According to one version of the Gemara, even if you have Kahanim Tahirim right here in this Beis Sav, don't worry about it. You can use the Tmeim, because, as Rashi in Pesachim explains, according to Rav Nachman, Tumah Hucha B'tzibur, the Torah was metayr the carbon, so to speak. Even if it's a carbon tummy, it's as though it's a carbon Torah, it's the highest level akrav. The Gemara had several kashas on Rav Nachman. The Gemara concluded that even Rav Nachman agrees that in some cases we're meant to prefer a carbon mitahara. For instance, if it entails shirayim. Shirayim can only be eaten if the carbon was brought b'tahara. So in that case, certainly we prefer bringing a b'tahara to enable the shirayim to be eaten. We learned about a carbon tzibur which is purchased by a yachid, Eloi Shal Aaron. It doesn't appear like carbon tzibur. With the Rabbanan, we prefer using a carbon tar because it might create the wrong impression. People might not realize that it's the carbon tzibur. And therefore, in that case, we prefer tahara. We learned about ritzitzitz. The conclusion was like this. We have tumah that occurs with the kohen himself. That only works by a carbon tzibur. According to Rav Nachman and Rav Yehuda, as we saw later, tumah hucha b'tzibur. According to Rav Sheshes and Rav Shimon, tumah t'chuyi b'tzibur. But by a carbon yachid, there's no heter whatsoever. However, when the tumah occurs with a carbon, then we have a concept of ritzitzitz. Let's go down the line. If it happened to a carbon tzibur, whose dam or bas or chel became tummy, so once again, according to Rav Nachman, there's no need for a tzitz, tumah hucha b'tzibur. According to Rav Sheshes, tumah presents a concern, and therefore the tzitz comes along and the ratzah rectifies that deficiency. By a carbon yachid, which became tummy, the dam, bas or chelav, all shittas agree, over here we need a tzitz to take care of it. It's a carbon yachid. It's a deficient carbon, it's tummy. But the chiddush is that tzitz has the ability to do a ratzah on the tumah of even a carbon yachid. Now, according to Rav Shimon, a tzitz will work even if it's not being worn by the Kohen Gadol. Whereas according to Rabbi Yehuda, it only works together with the Kohen Gadol. It's a team. The Kohen with the tzitz, amaratza, on the tumah of the korban. And we proceeded to explain the pasuk, each shita according to his approach. Hatzlacha Rabbi Biwa.